G'day guys, thank you for joining us on today's webinar. My name's Malcolm Groves from Code Partners. Just in case you're not aware, Code Partners, we're an Australian-based company. We focus on helping people with their development and DevOps projects. That help could consist of providing tools that they can use, such as Reg Studio in this case. But it also extends through to services. So we do training, we do help people with actual project work, right through to, in some cases, doing their development projects and their DevOps projects for them. So we've got today's webinar. It's quite a long one, so we might get started without waiting around too much. Okay, with the introductions out of the road, let's get to the webinar. So here's the topic for today. I think this is an awesome story. The title is Converting a 20-year-old legacy Delphi 6 app into a robust modern application. I've got a couple of people here with me today who are actually doing most of the hard work. Guys, I'll just get you to go around and introduce yourself. Kelva, can you, I know your name's very well known in the community, but can you just introduce yourself for everyone listening?
Oh, sure. Hello, Malcolm. Hello, everybody. My name is Kelver. I'm the head of the business unit, the services business unit in the Embarcadero partner here in Brazil. So our job is to help companies to use Delphi better. So we give consulting, training, this kind of stuff.
Cool. And as guys, as you'll find out, Kelva was very closely involved in this project that we're going to talk about. So it's great that we've got him on. And Fernando, again, you're quite well known, but do you want to introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah, hello Malcolm, hello everyone. So I'm Fernando, I'm a software consultant at Embarcadero. And basically in this project, I helped Kelverstein a little bit to convincing the customer, as we are going to see in the presentation, to keep using Delphi.
Fantastic. Well, and I appreciate you guys joining this. I know it's a little bit outside of your region, but it's such a great story. I wanted to get it straight from you people who are involved. Okay, and I've already introduced myself, so we won't do that again. So let's get straight into the story. So what we're going to, before we get to talk about the project in particular, I wanted to preface this with a little bit of a discussion, because a big part of this story is about sort of recognizing that Delphi is not the same as it was 20 years ago. Yeah. As you'll see, that's a key sort of part of this story. So I just wanted to, a little bit at the start, sort of remind some people and maybe introduce for some people some of the changes that have happened over recent years. So hopefully you're aware that the Embarcadero set of products are now part of Idera. Now you may not be fully aware of who Idera are. They're an American company, but as you can see from this picture, they've been very focused on building up a portfolio of products, and not just a random sort of selection of products that, that there's a method to this portfolio of products. So you can see Embarcadero about, I don't know, 2/3 of the way up that arrow, that acquisition, and then from there, you can see several products: TestRail, Ranorex, Sencha, Travis CI up the top there. So there's been a continual growth and expansion of the products. But as I mentioned, it's not just any old products. If you look at this slide, there's a plan around these three divisions of the company: database tools, developer tools, and DevOps tools. And so the Embarcadero products fit squarely in the middle in the developer tools. But you'll see, for example, when we get to talk about this company, there's several of these other products like Ranorex and Travis involved in the project that we're going to talk about. So really, Idera focused on this vision of serving database tools, developer tools, and DevOps tools. And really, if you think about it, this is all about servicing the people who create software. Yeah? As you'll see in this project, modern applications are much more than just an IDE and a framework. There's many pieces that go into supporting one of these, and so Idera's vision really is starting to line up around supporting that creative development process from sort of end to end. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's a little bit of context. As I mentioned, very focused on developers, and as part of that, we've seen a massive growth in the capabilities of Delphi over the last 8 years. Yeah, if you look at this picture, as users, we see the gradual growth year to year. But whenever I step back and look at this picture and really think about, the platforms that we can now support in products inside Rad Studio, and the expansion of this, through Mac OS and Win64, iOS, Android, iOS 64-bit, through Windows RT and Linux. That's all happened in the space of the last 7 or 8 years. So the Delphi as a product is not the same product as it was 10 years ago. Yeah, it still supports what it supported 10 years ago, and we regularly hear stories of people who are taking code from 15 years ago and updating it for modern platforms. But your choices and your capabilities are much broader than they were before. Now, I think this is important when we get to the story today. You'll see that this is a great example of someone taking advantage of this fact that the tool that they're familiar with can now do so much more, and fit into a much more diverse and modern architecture. Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of enough of the preface, I think. Let's get to the actual story. And at this point, I'm going to lean more heavily on Kelver and Fernando. So guys, do you want to help set the scene for this project? Let's go back to talking about the company itself, who's behind this project.
Yeah, sure. So basically, talk about the history of this transportation company. They, as you can see in the slides, they start the company in 1977 and experimented a huge growth through the first and second decade. Around 2004, they deployed the largest parcel sorter in Latin America. This actually was probably the first one that was delivered here in Latin America. It was like inspired in the FedEx distribution center in the US. Then in 2016, they opened a new headquarters in São Paulo, and this is the largest logistics hub in Latin America as well. So it's like we can say today they still the largest transportation company in the country. Not only here in São Paulo, but the entire country. They covers as you know, we have a continental country, so they covers the entire country, every state, every city. So it's a really huge company. Okay,
and as you just mentioned, and a fairly old company, like 1977, getting started in there through to 2016, being the biggest. I mean, that's you mentioned it was inspired by FedEx, and so kind of in my mind, I know it's not FedEx, but in my mind, I kind of think of them like FedEx. They've got it's parcel delivery. They've got vans going around picking up parcels, delivering parcels. That's kind of I'm in the right space when I kind of think of it like that.
Yeah, in this something like that. Yeah.
Okay. So I think this slide helps give a little bit of the scale, especially that number of. Actually, I have to count the zeros. 1.2 million sort of dispatches per month. That's amazing.
Yeah, this is the number. Yeah, really.
Yeah, I had to work out how many zeros there were there just to get it right. 1.2 million and 60,000 deliveries a day, 96 million kilometers per year. So that's this is not a small company. This is a pretty,
absolutely.
yeah. Okay. Cool. So, I mean, I think that's important because you see this you see this with Delphi in a lot of places, that these companies start, they're small companies, they're at the beginning, and their systems kind of grow with them. As they grow, the systems that they start building have to expand, and as you suggested on that last slide, the growth sort of accelerated for these guys fairly quickly at some point.
So on the 99 year, that year was when they started planning to create a new system. At that time, they had a command line system, a DOS system, and they wanted to have some modern software inside the company. So they decided to use Delphi 6, and on the end of the year, and in 2000 they started creating that software using what was truly modern on that time, client server, using Oracle and BDE, this kind of stuff. So the big challenge is to keep all these things running through the years, and in an age that a smartphone is obsolete 6 months later, a system that was created 20 years ago is hard to keep modern, So that was the main question nowadays. But at that time, it was really powerful, and as you will see, it helped the company to grow the number of branches and business value, in fact. So at that time, they had 16 branches, and when during the years, they were able to grow a lot of the size. So you can go to the next slide, please.
Yeah, just on that, you see this, we see this very often where, a company like this, they choose Delphi way back, and they start building their own custom software in-house, and it serves them really well for a long time because they can tailor their software exactly to what they need. They can build in their very specific features. There's a really fast turnaround time when building it with Delphi, so they can be really responsive and really get exactly the system they want quickly. Yeah.
Sure. And as you can see, 1 year later, they already were running the software and started implementing the electronic document interface to make easier the integration with their customers. And as Fernando said a few slides ago, in 2004 they introduced the first sorter, and probably the biggest one in Latin America, and the first one in Latin America. So do you want to show the video now?
Yeah. So just for everybody on the call who most of us probably aren't experts at freight, when we're talking about a sorter, I'll just play a little video to show you what a sorter is. Hang on, I think it's got some audio which I might mute just so we can talk over the top of it. But when we're talking about a sorter, it's this kind of thing, parcels going down a conveyor belt, getting routed down to the correct loading dock. I'm assuming at the end of those chutes there's a truck parked where where there's someone loading those parcels on, and this is all computer controlled. This system that they built deciding which chutes these parcels need to go down and routing them down just in time, I guess.
Exactly, and by that time it was a big deal, like, because the preview system was made in COBOL, so it was like just a black screen with a cursor. And when they delivered this first version with Delphi, everything visual, using, of course, Windows and mouse integration, things like that, was really like made a huge impact in the company.
Yeah. I mean,
this software on that time, it was controlled by a software. So each box that you see in the screen, for each box, it asked a system, a software that was running as a service, and it asked that software where should that box be delivered. In each of this part, it should deliver the box, and the software would consult the database through a SQL statement, and then to tell the sorter, please deliver this on the out number 3, for example, and the system should be really fast. It's so critical. So if it doesn't answer in a short time, the box will run all the sorter through the next step and occupying a position that could be used with other box, other volume. So it was really important. The speed was really important at that time.
Yeah, I guess you've got a limited window between when the box was scanned.
Yeah.
So the system knows what it is, and having to get back and say, right, this chute. Otherwise, I guess goes down to some manual.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. I could watch that video for so long. It's almost like a meditation watching these boxes scoot around. It's really cool. Okay, so that's so that's actually, if you look at those years, that's not a lot of time. They started building this sort of client server system in early 2000, and then during that same year, the first system went into production, and then by 2004, they're controlling a parcel sorting system like that, all on the back of this sort of custom system in Delphi.
Yeah. In 2006, they started a new concept that they called advanced docs. That is a doc inside a customer, so it could make some. So it could turn some operations faster, because when the box, the volumes arrive at the company, they were already identified, for example, and it was a big step to deal with bigger customers.
Yeah. Okay. So to go back to the earlier point, I mean, I think this is a great example of how having control over your own software and building your software in-house means that you can dream up ideas like this and then implement it. You don't have to somehow be constrained by some external system that you've bought.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So up until this point, things are going really well, it seems. They've rolled out the system, everything's progressing fantastically. So what went wrong?
Exactly. Everything is good. Why we think about changing something, right? Yeah, exactly. But that's, like we said, this was a client-server architecture. So as the company started growing and open more and more branches, we had to scale the backend. So this starts meaning a lot of money, like more data center resources, more software for remote connections and remote terminals. Like considering the amount of users in total in the system, the biggest part at that time was external, not more in the headquarters. So from 2,000 users, we can say like more than 1,000 and a half are external users, meaning users that are in the branch, not in the headquarters where the systems are located, right? So they had to have some solution for that, and the solution was using remote terminals with private links, which of course costs a lot. So for each new branch, a new link and a more remote terminal license to support these users that were not located in the headquarters facilities, right? So this is
and so I think that's an important point to understand, is that this client server system was in sort of the head office, I guess, or the main terminal or something, whatever you want to call it, and that's fine. But as they got more branches going, it kind of makes sense that they all have to know about each other, because a parcel that gets loaded on at one branch, when it gets offloaded at a different branch, that branch needs to also be able to scan it and know all the details of it. And so their solution to this was to have everybody kind of remote desktop, or Citrix, I guess. Citrix, was it? Into the head office. So it's kind of like they were all actually running in the head office.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And as you say, that's expensive. You got data links into the head office from every branch. You got Citrix licenses.
Citrix servers, like just to support Citrix, there are like 20 servers that was just remote terminal service, not anything, just to remote the screen, right?
Yeah, and the staff to support Citrix and all the rest of it. So this custom built client server system is turning into a bit of a beast.
Exactly.
Yeah. You can guess how much server they have. They need to have to host all these users. I remember they told something about more than 20 Citrix servers inside the company.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Just to handle remote access.
Just to handle remote connection. Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. Okay. And this third point here kind of makes me laugh, although it's not terribly funny. So as they got bigger, they became interesting for other companies to start to target.
Yeah. Yep. Then in 2007, around 2007, they hired a new IT guy, let's say, a new management team for the IT side. Basically, like there was some pressure from consulting services and the company that you were. By that time, there were some evaluations about like selling the company, or some multinational companies trying to buy this transportation company, and a lot of consulting services and the consultant is going there to evaluate the company, and they put a new entire new management team in the IT. They replaced almost everyone, just the Delphi developers were left there because they have to keep the system running, and started looking for alternatives. Like the mantra by that time, it was like, we need to stop this development in browse for some reason, because it's working, but we need to stop and use something from the market, like SAPs or any other package that is like cool or is well accepted by the external competitors and the players. So this is where things start changing.
Yeah, and it's ironic, isn't it? Because it's to me, one of the key competitive advantages they've had up until this point is the fact that they can customize, and they're nimble. They can add these new, the advanced docking system you were talking about. They can add all these features that are exactly tailored to what they want to do, because they control the software.
Exactly.
and yet now the mantra is no. We shouldn't be doing all of that. We should be exactly like our competitors, the competitors that we've just beaten by being nimble.
Exactly.
Yeah. But unfortunately, it's a common story, isn't it? Adopt what everybody else has adopted, but somehow be different.
Exactly. That was the case.
Okay, so now I can see why the story's getting scary. It's this is the part of the movie where the bad guy first starts to show up. Okay, so it looks like they've adopted SAP as what they were going to move to.
Yeah,
they tried. SAP is a huge system, is a huge enterprise resource planning software, but we can guess how much customizations the team did during the 7 years ago at that time. Daily they were developing and coding a lot of features that the business guys asked for. So is it possible to have all this customization inside a system in the market, inside a software in the market? Of course, the answer is no. But they tried, and they tried about for 3 years, around 3 years, and of course it didn't work. It has minimum adoption because of that number of customization, and the project was declining.
And I like that the second last point there is that while all of this was going on during this 3 years when they were trying to adapt this off-the-shelf system to their very tailored environment, meanwhile, the Delphi team is still chugging along, keeping things going, making changes for customers, still keeping the business running, basically.
Exactly.
And there were times where, by that time, I worked some years in this project in the past, and sometimes you hear things like, okay, now we need to connect the sorter to this and to that, and you can hear things like, oops, but we don't have a way to directly connect the sorter or talk to the sorter. You need to build a new model, and you need to build. So it was was a decision from someone in the business side that we need SAP, but no one really stopped to understand what this will mean for the company, right? And during all these years, the Delphi application is still working, of course, and keeping the company running and make money. So they just throw out this 3 years and all investment in the SAP. And one day, the guy who really manages the company in one morning stopped the project and they fired everyone involved, and they went back to the Delphi application. But yet, in this time, not considering to keep Delphi. Okay, let's think about another plan. This one doesn't work, but let's think about another idea.
Yeah. Well, and in hindsight, it's not that surprising because, as I think, as you said, Calver, that you can't expect the value of an SAP or an off-the-shelf system is that you don't have to build all of this custom functionality, that it's just standard. But in hindsight, you can see it was never going to work because their business requirements were not standard.
Exactly.
And the second you take one of these off-the-shelf systems and start customizing it so dramatically that it becomes super expensive, you're basically trying to get it to do something it was never intended for. Yeah. Okay. So, but even at this point, they hadn't realized that the plan was wrong. That the plan was still to replace it, just not with SAP now.
Exactly. They still replacing by something else that was like better and modern. So
more modern. Okay.
Yeah.
So attempt 2. This is what we're looking at now. Of course, it was Java and Oracle. It was This is 2011, so of course it was Java and Oracle.
Exactly. And their main database is Oracle. It's still being Oracle. So they use the Oracle a lot, right? They have a big Oracle deployment there.
Yeah, they have more than 120 processor cores to Oracle. And the database in production is around 20 terabytes.
Okay.
So,
and I think you said earlier that even their Delphi app, the back end was Oracle. Was that right?
Yes. Always was Oracle. And then the guys from Oracle come there and they said, well, we have a logistic package that is Oracle. So everything is Oracle. So we are going to be fine, right? Because it's not Oracle. They bought a company. Oracle bought this company to be part of their ERP, and they convinced by that time the company to deliver this Oracle solution without any additional costs. You just need to keep paying the database and pay for the customizations you are going to need, right? So as
so this is another. So sorry, I didn't understand this before. So you're saying this is another off-the-shelf ERP system? It's just one owned by Oracle.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So what could go wrong? Seems like a reasonable plan.
Yeah. Then again,
too much customization were needed.
Yeah. Customizations and more customizations, and by that time they did something. They had some bad decisions, like they deployed some areas that are not the core of the company, like finance, payroll, and of course this works, right? Because this is standard. Like finance is a standard, payroll is a standard thing, but not the core of the operational side where Delphi was working. So they started deploying these staff areas, and of course this worked. But then when the operational side wasn't time to be replaced, they realized like how long was taking to have any customization delivered to the end user. Because in Delphi, the team the team that was there knows the company very well. So when there is a new need, and they have some specific needs, like there are big customers that made an agreement with them, but it requires some special information, some special reports, some special integration, things like that. And they used to do this, especially for one customer. There's no problem. Like, let's do this for this customer to have this contract, right? And this was very fast with Delphi. Like the guy normally do a plan about what we're going to do, and the schedules were like, okay, we can have this in 2 weeks or 4 weeks. And in the new system, the delivery time, it was like 3 months, 4 months, 6 months to have something new delivered to the end user. So they realized that it would be a problem, because moving fast and being able to support the customer needs was key to keep growing. Huh?
Yeah, well, that's how they'd grown in the first place, I imagine, is by being able to win those contracts, by being able to adapt to the customer.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I should say, like, over the last few slides, I've kind of, it sounds like I'm taking joy in this story. I'm not. I mean, this is not a happy story. This is a sad story.
Oh, yeah.
But the reason that I'm kind of laughing a little bit is because we've seen it so many times, haven't we? Like, this is not a unique story. This is a common story that we've all seen all around the world over the last 10, 15 years.
Exactly. So at the end, with the Oracle, they decided to keep all the other modules like finance, payroll, and etc., payment, and all this stuff, but they gave it up in replacing the operational side one more time, doing the impact you have.
Yeah. So we're now, what year are we in now when they've made this decision?
No, by that time we were not there.
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we are totally out in this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they kept.
And meanwhile, the Delphi app and the Delphi team are continuing to roll along and keep the business running.
Exactly. They were alone, and when they actually this decision to not replace the operational system by that time, it was also because they are about to move to a new headquarters. So a lot of things happening at the same time, like a new headquarters, a new parcel sorting that was about to enter in production, and the operational system not ready yet to replace the Delphi system, and the time was running, and they have a date to move to this new place, so they decided to move to the new headquarters and keeping the same application, the same operation application, right? So this, we can say this was the point where they start looking again to Delphi or to the internal team, because of course there was a lot of work to adapt the system to this new parcel sorting, and the team was able to deliver this really fast and to match the agenda, the schedule they need. So this, I think, were when they start looking again to the internal people and to the guys that was keeping the company running, right? Yeah.
This we've got another video here, and at the beginning it looks kind of the same, but there's a moment. Keep your eyes on it, guys, because there's a moment where it sort of the camera pans up and you get a feeling for just how big this is. The scope is huge. So here the parcels are waiting for a gap in the main conveyor, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah, so this bit coming up, I think they'll pan up and you just realize how large this area is. And here we go. You can't even see the end of it. So this is the new system that in the new facility that they're moving into, that they need to adapt the existing Delphi operational system to handle.
Yeah. At this time, the sorter is more independent because all the information it needs is in the barcode. So when it passes through that big scanner on the way, it takes it reads the barcode and it knows where should the box be delivered. In each dock, the box should be delivered, and each parts will run and through right or left, and the box will be dropped.
Okay. So even the process of integrating with this system has changed. So the Delphi guys have got to adapt yet again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So let's hop back. So move to a new headquarters, the new system that the Delphi guys had to adapt to yet again. And as I think you mentioned before, this is the point where maybe the management started to realize that the solution to their problems might have been in the company the whole time.
Yeah.
Okay. So take us through this. We're in 2014, and as the title of this one says, they decided to give Delphi another chance. That must have been a series of interesting conversations.
Yeah. Basically, I think this are the main restrictions. Like they understand now how much customizations they need and how fast they need this customization. So having an internal team and a software they can totally control was key. Like it's not possible to depend from external thing or waiting for schedules that are really like elastic. So
yeah,
by that time they again started considering to do something to improve the internal system, like moving to a better architecture or doing a refactoring or providing more resources to the internal developers, a new version of Delphi and things like that.
yeah.
So this is where this new history started. And also because Delphi by this time has also more to offer, like mobile, broad server, Linux, things that were not present in the past, right?
Yeah, and that's a good point to make, I guess, is that it wasn't just that the company took a long time to realize that Delphi could do it all along. It was also that Delphi now had other capabilities that it didn't have previously.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that third point in there is a good one as well. It wasn't just that they could be more responsive, but they must have spent, that was what was it, 9 years or something of SAP project and then Oracle project. That must have cost them a fortune.
Yeah, sure.
Wow. Okay. And this second last point I love as well. The business rules and the knowledge was already in this application that they had.
Yes.
And not only that, but there had been years of debugging. So that source code was worth. There'd been a massive investment already in that source code over the many years to make it really truly reflect what the business did.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
At that time, they wondered that to stay with the technology is right decision, and started looking to it with another eyes, and giving a chance to create some evolutions in their system with the language, and instead of only keep things running. They was thinking something like, let's give it a chance. Let's try something new. Let's take a look and at what the market is doing and if it's possible to do with Delphi and things like that. And in the second half of last year, around August or September, I'm not sure. They started talking with us about some help in some consulting to understand their scenario and how we could help them to create a new architecture and help them achieve their targets.
Yeah, so, and that makes a lot of sense, because if we think back, the previous app, even though it was customized to exactly what they want, it was a client-server app, and they were enabling remote access through those really expensive Citrix licenses and 20 Citrix servers in the head office. So that solution as it is also isn't going to work, is it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So what they brought you guys in to help, set the vision for how they could take what they had forward. This slide talks about the proof of concept. So can you talk a bit about what you tried to do in that proof of concept?
Sure. It was consulting we gave them in order to understand how many source code they have, how many projects, and modules, and how many items in the backlog they have, and their complexity, and how was what were the plans of the company plans to growth to the next 5 and 10 years. So with this information, we could understand the current scenario and propose some new architecture to help them achieve this, as I was saying. And the proof of concept was it was composed by some studying some actions that was studying their scenario, that was showing them some technologies and creating documentation that showed them all the steps they would take to get the system in a new architecture. And one of the main questions that they always make us was about rewrite everything, because if they need to rewrite all the code, it will be not so good, because it needs more and more tests, and the risks are so higher, right? Yeah. So what we showed them was some ways to get all those codes, those business rules, to a new structure, to a new architecture that could help them to achieve scalability, that would help them to be elastic, that would be fault tolerant, that could recover itself from fault. This kind of modern, this kind of things that modern architectures have, and they could use all these things inside their company, on their own infrastructure. And once we showed all those documentation and those ways that they could follow, they could run through some of these ways. So we delivered this documentation around the second half of November last year, and in the start of December last year, they called us again and said, "Hey, we studied the documentation. We think this is good, but we want to make a pilot project. So we want to prove the proof of concept." and then they gave us an idea of an application to run on Android barcode readers that they need to deploy in a new branch. And then from the idea, from the first conversation to the deployment in production, we took 4 to 5 days to concept the app, to take the notes from the idea, to project it and implement this application, this Android application. We spent 45 days in the end of the year. So we had Christmas and all the holidays that is involved. So a short time to show them in practice all the things that we were showing in the papers only at that time. And with this project, only this application, they were able to save about 700 Citrix users, because with this application they would be able to replace all the old hardwares that that were the barcode readers. You know that these hardwares, they are old and difficult to maintain, to buy new ones because they are old, and they have some difficulties related to Citrix updates in those old hardwares. So beyond the IT management difficulties that this project solves, we could help to save money with the Citrix license, and of course all the other things that this kind of architecture can deliver, like scalable, the scalability, elasticity, and bandwidth consumed, because they don't need to transfer all the screen by streaming, so only the data needed at that time is transferred through their internet connection and this kind of things. And that was the first project, and after that we started creating other projects, and not migrating, but evolving their software to a new architecture. So we are helping them to get some features. They decide what features are more relevant, and then we help them to get these features in the new architecture.
So I think there's a bunch of things in there that are worth calling out. So I guess the first thing is that they've just been through, over the previous 9 years, they've just been through 2 largely failed projects where much time and much money was spent and not an awful lot was delivered. And so now with this new architecture, that first proof of concept you're delivering in 45 days over Christmas and New Year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. And then secondly, that this thing, rather than being a bunch of money they had to spend, it actually saved them money, this first sort of project. So I imagine that dramatically changed the view inside the company. Like, from if anyone was skeptical before this, they probably weren't afterwards.
Yeah.
And we'll have a look at the architecture in a second. But the other question I guess I want to ask is that, there's been a Delphi team in here of 8 or 10 guys or whatever through all of this. They've been in there keeping the company going, working on the Delphi project. Here, they've suddenly things are changing for them. Like for the last 10 years or whatever, it's been fairly continual for them. Now, I'm sure they've been worried about what was happening, but it's been fairly, not a lot of change has occurred for them. Suddenly, this is a big change for them. How were they? Were they scared? Were they excited? What was the feeling?
Well, every time we change something, it caused some a kind of fear, right? So they felt this kind of fear on the beginning, because we started using some things that they didn't know at that time. But as soon as we were showing them that at the end is all Delphi code, this feeling was going away. So it's like to use, it's like to teach them that they need to do a little bit different the things that they used to do. So what the problem was more related to the concepts than the technology itself. So how to take care of an API creating related to security and performance, how to serialize data in another format that for example, is JSON content, this kind of technical things related to the concept, not to the technology itself, because back it's all Delphi code, right? And after this beginning, they were feeling more confident and more able to do the things.
And that's understandable, because it's really easy for all of us to get comfortable in what we're doing and get into our comfort zone. But it can be hard to break out of that and risky. But every time I've done it, the end result has been positive, and you've learnt more, and your skills are updated, and you get some of that excitement about the technology back again. So I kind of understand how it wouldn't have been easy for them, but it's kind of important that they did it.
Exactly, and you can imagine how they were motivated, right? The internal team, because they worked for more than 10 years in Delphi 6 and 7, and it just starting a Windows system and following the same pattern every day. And then in few weeks, they were in front of something that can create a mobile application, a backend application, a Linux module for Apache. Of course, this is all new, right? So this also was important because they were really motivated to produce and produce and produce. So it's an interesting thing,
Yeah. Well, and I guess their pride was on the line as well, because they'd watched all these failed projects over the years, and they'd kept the company going. So now they had to prove the point that we could be the saviors of the company, not those other guys.
Yep.
Okay, so should we have a look at actually what the architecture looks like?
Yeah.
Is this the point where we do that? Okay. So who wants to talk us through this?
Yeah, this is all that documentation I was saying a couple of minutes ago was summarized it in this picture. In the middle of this image, we can see the Delphi modules that we was suggesting, yes. And we used some of the theories and techniques of microservices. So if you take a look at the microservices documentation, you will see that they have a lot of patterns to implement microservices. There's not only a single way to do this. So we used a mix of these patterns. Because at some point you need more performance, at some point you need more scalability, and there are a lot of ways to go with microservices. But in summary, we could we could break some responsibilities in services and microservices, and let Delphi do what at that time he's more able to do. That is the business rules. So all the business rules are inside this microservices, and to keep these microservices running, we need some assistant tools. For example, tools to monitor and make some login that are on the left, exactly where you have the mouse at this time. And because it's sometimes when you have 2 or 3 services running in a machine, we have some difficulty to see if everything is up and running, if to set up some ports or this kind of things. So guess if you have thousands or dozens, or at least, of services running, and each services with 2 or 3 instances. So to manage all these things, you need help. So to monitor and log in everything that is done, it's really important. At the right, we have the services layer that we introduced some market services to help and to decrease the Oracle dependency. Because, for example, if you think about postal code to a shipping company like this, to a transport management system, the postal code is something that is frequently accessed in the database, right? Every time you need to check the address, and the postal code is important to this. So, and the postal code generally doesn't change during the year. It doesn't change a lot, right? So why should I look at the hard drive, at the database, every time I need to check a postal code? Why can't I put all this information in a memory database like RabbitMQ, like Redis, or like Postgres using a memory driver, for example? And this kind of things that we help them to do. So, in other words, every time we know that something is already implemented and running, we don't create it again. So, of course, in Delphi, we can implement an in-memory database, right? Everybody knows the client data set and FireDAC memory table, for example. But why should I use it if there's something already working and so validated? So it's just to use it. So Oracle, Redis, MongoDB to make some known relational storage and processing. So, this kind of market services. And more at the right, at this image, we have a layer that related to the development. So with these tools like RenderX, that is part of IDERA team, we could help the customer to be sure the things delivered is the things delivered are right. They are corresponding to the request that origin the implementation. So Sonar to help us to get some quality in the code, RenderX to get some functional quality, and everything, all these things managed by the GitLab services to make the continuous integration and continuous delivery. And as everybody might heard about, we use Docker, or the container terms, that is the top layer about the infrastructure. So to make even easier the deployment, we use Docker in the production environment, using some tools like Ansible to help create the images, and Kubernetes to make the orchestration, and everything running on Linux. In this case, we use Ubuntu as the operation system, and we also use Docker in the development part, that is in the bottom on the right corner, because it's easier to create the environment for development using this kind of tools. If anyone that is watching this video and never heard about Docker, I really recommend you do this as soon as you could. And all this architecture and the Delphi tools, the Embarcadero tools, helping us to create client side in any technology. So in the left corner, we can have web clients using Sencha, for example, that it's already that it's another IDERA company. We can have mobile clients with Delphi, desktop clients with Delphi, barcode scanners and Android barcode scanners with Delphi. So we can deliver all the clients they need we could create with these tools, and doing some integrations, for example, with local services like delivery controls, like governmental systems, and all this communication controlled by a proxy layer that is above this, with certbot and Let's Encrypt to get the certificate, in an automated way, because you don't need to create the certificates every time, and you don't need to worry about the API registration. So each time a service starts, it registers itself in the proxy layer in order to the clients be able to talk with the services. So this is in a summary the parts of this new architecture they are using and migrating. And of course, one thing that is really important to mention is not a simple turn and everything is working. If we want to use all these technologies at a single shot, it will be really hard to do. Almost, I would say that would be impossible. So we created some strategies to them, so we could tell them what of these tools would be necessary at a short time, in a medium time, in a longer time. So again, you need to add these tools, add these technologies step by step. Don't try to use all these things from tomorrow we will use all these. You need to create a plan to be adopting all these tools to be successful.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because these things don't, these sort of, you pull in these external pieces as required, kind of.
Exactly.
You don't, on the first day, you don't install RabbitMQ and Redis and Mongo and Postgres, out of the gate. They're pulled in as they're needed. I guess the other thing that I would say about this, a couple of things maybe, is for the people who are watching this who maybe aren't familiar with all of these technologies, this could look really overwhelming. Like, wow, I've just gone from something fairly simple, which is Delphi and the VCL, and I know it very well, and suddenly there's 30 logos on the screen that I don't know what any of them do. But it's what I've found. We've done, not on this scale, but we've done similar microservices projects for people. And what I've found is it's actually quite the opposite, because most of these pieces that the Delphi developers aren't thinking about day to day. The microservices actually lets them, I find, focus even more, because these red pieces with the DX icons, as you're taking the code from their existing system and refactoring it so that it can become, and splitting it out into these different services, all of these other pieces around it are kind of not at the forefront of your mind. In some ways, Docker and these microservices let you focus even more just on the business logic, because you're narrowing your vision down to, okay, just this service. I'm inside a Docker container. All the stuff outside it is not impacting me right now. I can just focus on the business logic.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think is really cool about this is, if you go to a container conference or a DevOps conference or whatever, and put this slide up on the screen in front of people who didn't know what Delphi was, if they just saw this, okay, they wouldn't know what DX stood for, but there would be nothing on this slide which was unusual to them. This would be just the most typical slide that you'd put it up there and they'd go, yeah, okay, I get it. It's Kubernetes based. you've got your monitoring stack, you've got your data services. Yep, that makes sense. So to me, that's awesome that Delphi, this tool that's been, you know, around but evolving for all these years, just slides in easily to this super modern, you know, stack and framework.
Yeah, I agree. Perfect. Because all the modern systems that are being created at this time are based on this kind of architecture, on this kind of tool. So our primary job is to remove some dependencies, extract the business rules, and turn this an endpoint. In other words, it's not easier like saying this because you need some effort to get this. But once you get that business rule inside a procedure or a function that results something specifically, you can turn it an endpoint, and all the ecosystem can use that endpoint and you can scale and you can be elastic. You know, all this benefits from an architecture like this.
Yeah. Yeah. So really, I mean, this shouldn't be overwhelming. I don't think people, as you said before, if people can focus on Delphi and understanding Docker and understanding how that lets them contain their application into a reusable sort of deployment piece, then all these other pieces talk to Docker and Kubernetes. So it's not that you've got to build all of this stuff into your code. If anything, your code gets simpler.
You add a lot of professional things in the context without having to develop everything.
Yeah. Okay, this is really cool. I think this is, you know, as I said, this is just a totally modern, recommended best practices architecture, and Delphi's right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else you want to say about this slide before we move on to have a bit of a look at the proof of concept app?
No, I think
that's it.
We have just one or two more slides that are about the first application that was delivered inside this architecture. It's actually a mobile application. Yeah.
And I think then, Fernando, after we do that, if we just said that people should have a look at Docker, you're going to, after we have a bit of a chat about the proof of concept application, you're going to give us a bit of a demo on Delphi and Red Server and Docker in particular, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So people should hang around for that. All right. So this was the, am I right? This was the proof of concept app that kind of kicked off all of this?
Yeah, this is the main screen of the barcode reader application that I said that was built in 45 days. So in the end of last year, it has these 5 functionalities that is in Portuguese. The text is in Portuguese, so you can understand. But each button it is a feature, and the last one is the close button, you know, to log out. So we have 5 main functions, main features that are used in the Android barcode readers.
So just to set the scene, who's using this? I guess there's someone in the warehouse with an Android-based barcode reader, scanning parcels as they come off the truck or something?
Yeah, inside the company, when a truck arrives, they need to know where each volume is stored inside the company. So we have rows and we have columns. It's a vertical storage, so they need to know exactly where each volume is stored. So once the truck arrives, they take off the volumes and store it. Some days later, they get these volumes, this box, and then put in another truck that will do the delivery. So to manage this internal control, this application was built. It's a kind of WMS system.
Like a warehouse management system.
But
small one.
Exactly, a small one.
Okay. No, but that's interesting because I guess this is why it was chosen for the proof of concept. But it's a relatively sort of self-contained set of functionality, but it proves the point that the larger system can be built this way as well.
Sure.
Okay. And looking at the screen, this is a FireMonkey Android application in Delphi 10.3.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Cool. And someone likes the dark theme, I see.
And this is only the screen that that shows to the user when it is waiting for barcode scanning.
Okay. So this is, you're scanning the barcode and it's talking off to those microservices that we saw before to retrieve where the box is or where it should be stored or those sorts of things.
Yeah. Yes. The app itself doesn't store anything. Every time the user clicks something or reads some box, some volume, it calls the backend to know what to do
or to validate the data and things like that. Yeah, and the endpoints, the REST endpoints are has the same business rules that are used in the desktop system. So this shows how you can reuse the things, right? So the same rules that you are used to control this, but from the point of view from a traditional desktop system, was migrated to these endpoints and then now called by these modern Android applications.
Let me go back to this picture. That's a really good point. So what you're saying is that the person running this barcode application is calling through to the same set of logic that the person running the desktop or the web application is calling through to as well. And this all was the same logic that was refactored out of the original Delphi application that kept the company going for years.
Yeah.
Cool. And then the other point that I think is worth calling out is that, this barcode scanner, I'm guessing, could be running in remote warehouses, and rather than having to use this private lines and Citrix servers and all the rest of it, it's just making secure calls back over the internet to this infrastructure. So that's why all the Citrix licenses went away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. This is really cool. All right. Well, thank you guys. I mean, I still think this is a fantastic story. I'm going to be telling this story for a long time. I know we're going to have like I mentioned before, we're going to have a bit of a demo on some of how to get started in some of these technologies with Docker and that server and those sorts of things. And then we're going to have a Q&A session for people to ask any questions. But is there anything else you'd like to say sort of before we wrap up?
No, I think we can go to the demos.
Awesome. So that's your call, Fernando. So you can take us away.
Okay, so let's take a look on the fundamental parts of this architecture of this project. So we're going to talk a little bit about RUD server, Docker, and how to deploy RUD server to a Docker container. So first thing, let's understand what is Docker. So Docker is a container solution. Of course, there are other container solutions available there, like we can see here, CoreOS, Mesos, OpenBSD, and many others, but Docker is de facto the most used, the most popular container solution available today. So we can say it's like a default for containerization, right? So what is a container, right? A container, I think we can explain better what is a container if we compare containers with virtual machines, the traditional virtual machines we use for development, for a lot of things. So virtual machines are a full abstraction of a machine, like where you have a full copy of the operational system, all of your applications installed, and etc. So they are huge. They use a lot of space. They use a lot of resources to load. And in another side, the containers or containers images are very small if compared to a virtual machine, because they share the same they share the core of the operational system. They share the kernel of the operational system. So you don't need to have a full copy of all your applications and the dependencies, etc. in each of these images, but each image is specialized in running one application, one solution, and they can interact between each other. So this is, I think, the best way to understand the difference between a container and a virtual machine. You have here some kind of isolation, but not a full isolation in terms of memory and etc. You have a process isolated, while in a virtual machine you have a full isolation of everything. So these are the main difference between the two things. But both solutions relies on the hypervisor. So you need to install Docker in a host machine, not inside another VM or things like that. You probably will find some posts in the articles in the internet where people teach how to install Docker even inside the virtual machine, but it's not an easy task. By default, you have to install Docker in the host operational system. Like here, we are going to use this macOS, but Docker is available not only for Mac, but also for Windows desktop, Mac desktop, and of course Linux. Normally these two platforms, macOS and Windows, are used for development. So you have Docker desktop, and on Linux normally are used for distribution for production systems. Of course you can use as well on Linux for development, but when you think about deploying Docker for production, normally people are talking about putting Docker on Linux and not on Windows or Mac. Okay, so first thing is to install Docker. I of course, in this operational system here, I already have Docker running, like we can see here. But basically, all you need to do is to download Docker for the operational system you are using. In this case, Docker desktop, and install. They have a community edition that is for free for development, so you can just download, install, and it's basically automatically processed. There's no much customization need to do, and at the end you are going to see a Docker engine running like we have here. So this service, this Docker service, allows you to interact with the Docker engine and create your images and put your containers to run. So having Docker installed, it's a basic process like next, finish. We can go to our command line here. So I have a terminal, in this case on Mac. If you are running on Windows, you go to your CMD or PowerShell. On Linux, to our Bash terminal, and you're going to start by creating your first Docker image, and then loading this image and putting a container to run. So to create a Docker image, you have special file. It's like a script where you define what you are going to put inside your image, or what kind of image you are going to create. So let's take a look on this script right here. All of your scripts are Docker files. This is the official name. You'll be based on another image. So there is a repository here called Docker Hub, where you can find a really interesting number of pre-built images. These images normally offer solutions for everything you need. Like you have a basic Ubuntu image, you have Apache, of course it will be a Linux with Apache running, you have MySQL, Couchbase, and everything else. Everything is available on this Docker Hub. There are images that are public and you can use without any restrictions, and there are some private repositories where people can store your own images and the images that you use in your company, and you want to keep this script private, also the image private. So this Docker Hub is where these base images or your image will be stored. So, okay, so in this script we are basing our image on Ubuntu, and then we start running some commands. So Docker will build this Docker file, we'll download the Ubuntu, so we'll base our image on this version of Ubuntu. We'll run some updates and install some dependencies that are needed to support Delphi applications. We are going to download PA server directly from Embarcadero, so you can install the PA server on the fly. You don't, or you can provide the PA server in the same folder of your Docker image and just copy the PA server inside your image. So you can use both approaches. But here I installing the PA server, defining the work there, and then starting the PA server and exposing some ports. In this case, I'm interested specifically on this port because this is the default port for PA server. So the IDE will be able to communicate to this Docker container directly, and we are going to have our Linux operational system running with PA server loaded. We are also exposing this port that will be used after for the RAD server. So let's first build this Docker file. So I have here some commands that I'm going to use. So first thing is to build the image. So this is the command to build the image. Let's go to our terminal and run doc build and give a name to our image. So sorry, let's go to the first to the folder where the images or the Docker files are located. So here we are, and then we can run. The script, of course, was very fast because I already have this image built in my system. If this is the first time you are running, it takes some more time to download and update the files, etc. But in this case, I already have the image ready to be used. So now we have this image called PA server Linux available in my Docker system locally. So first, next step, we are going to run this image and expose this port to the external world. So in this case, we are going to run the image called the PA server Linux and allows this port to be mapped to the host operational system. So with this, when you refer to this port in your operational system, you are also directly pointing to the port inside the container. So it's like a mapping between the container running and the host operational system. So let's run the okay. There is an issue because the ports are allocated, and this is because I have PS server here, so let's stop PS server that was running on Mac. We don't need this right now, so again, let's execute this one more time. Okay, so now we have one container running. You can do like Docker PS. We have our PA server Linux image running. The container name or container ID, you can find it here. Every time you run, this will give you a different name. So we have the container ID, we have the container name, and we can also interact with this operational system running inside this container. So you can like do something like this. For example, let's put here the container name, and this will allow you to execute in an interactive way the bash inside Linux. So when we do this, now we are looking to the we are navigating in the bash inside this container. So this is the Linux that is running inside the container. Like you can see here, we can navigate, we can look to the files and etc. So in the home folder we have the PS server, and in the PA server here you can see the PA server files that were installed by this script. So we can now go to our ID. So let's move here to this VM where I have Delphi 10.3.2 running. I think I already have a profile. So yeah, a profile pointing to this Docker container. Actually, this IP is the IP from the host machine. If we do here, if config is the IP from the host machine, right? Actually, the IP provided by the VirtualBox in this case. I'm using VirtualBox with net configuration. So you can try to connect the PS server direct that is running here inside this this container. So let's do a test. So we have a connection. So this means we have a PA server running inside Docker in this container that you can see here, right? So this is the first step, to put a container image up and running with PS server inside, because this allows you to deploy application directly from the IDE to directly inside the container. Okay, so let's move ahead and understand now how to deploy RAD server inside a container image. So we create the first container image using Ubuntu and just the PS server, so we can connect from the IDE and deploy our applications to this Linux container. And now let's understand how to put PS server, to put RAD server running inside the container. So let's take a look on this Docker file, this new Docker file. I have the file loaded here. So at this time, we are basing our image on this HTTPD image that is available on Docker Hub. So this provides you a Linux system, but already with Apache installed and running. So we are basing our image on this container, adding our other dependencies that we need to deploy a RAD server application, and then we start adding some stuff that are necessary for Red server for our application. First thing is we have, so let's look again to the folder where this Docker file is located. We have some files here that will be copied inside the image. Of course, in a production environment, the most correct scenario will be to have these files in some kind of HTTP server, maybe in GitHub, so you can dynamically download using the inside the Docker file, download these files and install in your image. But in this case, to demo purposes, we are going to use the files directly here in this directory, in this folder. So if we look to our Docker file, we are copying the HTTPD configuration to the Apache inside the container. So we have HTTP already with all the configurations that are necessary for Red server. You can find those configurations on the Red server documentation. We are copying the creating the interface client environment variables and copying the client library for interface also inside the container. This is necessary because so this is important. A container is basically read only. So everything you do inside a container, when you shut down this container, you're going to lose everything. There's no state in a container. This is a big difference also if compared with a virtual machine, right? So this means like you should not put inside a container like a database file, because the information inside a container is valid only during the time when the container is loaded and alive. You don't save the state of the container. So Red server, as you know, uses a license, and actually this license is an interbase license. So interbase is the core of the server, and the Red server's license is applied on this interbase. So you need to create first, to install Red server, interbase instance, and apply the Red server license in this interbase instance. With this running, you install Red server and point Red server to this interbase instance, right, where your license is applied and configured. So in this case, I have my interbase license, my interbase instance with the Red server license on a cloud machine, on a basic cloud machine, just for demo purposes, right? But normally you are going to put interbase in your, or maybe in your root machine, in the roast, or in another machine, and point your Red server's instance to this interbase instance where your license is registered, right? So we need the client library for interbase to access, to be able to connect to this interbase instance. And then I'm copying the Red server installer. This is provided with your Delphi installation, so you can find in the Delphi root folder, in the Delphi base folder installation, this script and this tar file, where everything you need from Red server is packaged. So we copy these files also inside the container and run the Red server installation. So every time your container loads in memory, it's going to the engine from Docker is going to execute this this Docker file and install your Red server again. Okay, so it's like every time you run this container is like a total new image from the scratch. It's a new instance and a total new containing in memory, like if you have just installed the files, right? So we install the Red server, and then in this image, and then copy this ini file also inside the container, and finally expose the HTTP standard port, like you can see here. So if we go back to our directory, we can see here these files that we are going to use in this Docker file. Just to give you some better idea, here we have the ini file from EMS, from RAD server. So I'm pointing to my interbase license that is available now on the machine just for testing purpose. So here is where my RAD server license is installed and configured, right? So my RAD server running on this container will point to this server here. And here the HTTPD conf, where we have here the configurations that are necessary to load the MES or RAD server. Okay, so if we run, let's go back to the terminal, and first thing, let's build the image. So at this time, everything is inside the image, including RAD server, etc. Let's run the image, the container, sorry, Docker PS. So we have the system is now running, as you can see here. We can connect like using a bash. Let's navigate a little bit in the system. So we can like maybe go to the etc ms, and you can do a cat. Here's the ini file. We copy to the container. We can go to the EMS folder. So we have all the files here, right? And so at this time, the server is already running. So we can go back to our browser and here test the connection. So I'm pointing to my localhost, okay, the full HTTP port. API is the name we used here. Is the name used here in the conf, in the HTTPD conf. So API is our resource name. Version is the default method from RAD server. So you have now RAD server running inside a container under Apache on Linux. Okay, so these are the basic steps to put RAD server running in the container. And then, of course, you're going to get your modules. You're going to develop it in Delphi, and then deploy together these containers. But then it's you are going to include these in your Docker file, what the modules you are going to deploy and to load inside your RAD server. Okay, so as our last topic for today, let's talk a little bit about the RAD server. So RAD server is our middleware or backend, a kind of container where you can deploy your REST endpoints. So basically, RAD server offers some ready-to-use features like user control, groups, devices control, integration with Active Directories, analytics, a dashboard for your analytics, documentation for your APIs, and in terms of development, you are going to create your endpoints. In the case of Delphi and the C++ builder, these will be projects that will generate a BPL file that you are going to deploy inside this RAD server container, right? So these endpoints can access any database using FireDAC or any other database framework you want to use, and you just need to take care of your business rules. So RAD server offers you all the infrastructure, all the resources you need to deploy your REST API locally on-premise or in cloud infrastructure you might want to use. So this basically is what RAD server offers. So let's take a look on RAD server on a basic project using some new resources we added in RAD server in the last Delphi and the C++ builder version. So you can start here in File, New, RAD server package. We can create an empty package or a package with a resource. This is our choice, right? So we can give here a resource name. So let's say Docker 101. We want to add the data modeling. Here we have something new. First, you can define the endpoints you are going to automatically generate in the samples, like some sample the endpoints you can use to then start developing your endpoints. You can automatically add the API documentation using Swagger, and now you can also automatically generate database endpoints, meaning you can generate the get, post, put, delete for your tables. So the CRUD, the basic work with the your tables can be done automatically. So I'm going to select here one database, this one. So I have MariaDB running on this Mac machine. We can choose here like some tables, right? And read finish. And as a result, we have RAD server project with the connections defined, already defined, and also the endpoints we selected. So the tables we select with the methods already created. So you have here the attributes saying we are going to use to have like inside our Docker 101 resource we have API, we have this endpoint and this endpoint. We can rename this as well, of course. So let's just use country and customer. So we have here everything you need to input data, delete, and list data from these tables, from these data sets. This is done by this TMS dataset resource, where you can configure the actions and a lot of things, additional things like page size, pagination, and etc. Okay, so we can just run this locally. So this is what we are going to use when running when testing your application, when developing your application. RAD server has a local server, a development server that's automatically installed with Delphi. So you just need to run your application. Let's save it here. This console shows you some logs, the methods that are available, and etc. We can open the browser. Here we have the version. So our endpoint Docker 101 customer. Let me see. The name is not customer. Yeah, it's customer Docker 101. It's customer. Okay, here we are. So these are the the data from this data set automatically serialized in JSON. So we have a standard REST endpoint generated just in seconds. So this is a BPL, and this is what you are going to configure to deploy in Linux. Of course, you need to then deploy this file to get your RAD server inside Docker, into the dependencies like database connections, things like that. Okay, just to give you some better idea, let me load here another project. It actually is almost the same project, but really quickly let me load here this one, because here I have already added the documentation, the Swagger documentation. Actually, the documentation is generated for you. You don't need to do anything. Of course, you're going to then complete the documentation, add more information. But if we run this project, it's basically the same one, but with all the data sets. So in this sample, I have added all the data sets, so you can run this project. And here, same thing, right? We have the customers. This is the original name generated by the wizard. Then we have the documentation, the Swagger documentation. Look here, we have the JSON documentation, and as you can see here, so all the documentation that is added in the code, like for example here, you can describe what the reason for this API, what the restrictions are, etc., the results, and etc. So we have all the documentation in JSON format, and then you can download the Swagger interface. So there are some JavaScript files and the HTML file where you can use it to point to your documentation and explore your documentation in a very professional way. So this is something that you can publish to your end users, to your developers, or to who we are going to consume your APIs. So a very professional documentation automatically generated in the part of the server. Like if we search here for customer, it's here. So we can understand the parameters, we can understand the headers, and you can also execute test the method. So your end user can use this, your developer can use this to test, or the companies are doing some integration, things like that. So this is the Swagger interface applied to the documentation generated by RAD server, now with this feature, this Swagger documentation integrated. Okay. So here we have some additional links, especially if you are going to try Docker and of course RAD server with Docker. Here we have some additional resources for Docker initially, and then some more resources for RAD server, right? Started by the documentation, and in this blog post you can find the ebook about RAD server, where all these more deep details about the deployment, etc. are covered. So we'll make this presentation available so you can easily follow with the links. So that's it, and let's now for a live Q&A session.
Thank you, Fernando. Let me just flip back over to this this slide from the session. I think that we've had a few questions come in during the session that relate to this slide, so I thought I'd just put this up on the screen while while we go through them. Just before we get to that, we've had a number of questions about whether there'll be a replay, whether the materials will be available. So yes, there will be a replay available afterwards. We had a number of people who wanted to get their bosses to watch the replay. So I think some of those early messages about looking everywhere except internally for a solution sort of hit home with a bunch of people. But we also had a couple of questions internally that I think we answered by the time we got to the demos. But just to be clear, so I don't know, Fernando or Kelver, if you're still online, but one question that came up a couple of times was around, back on this picture, around these Delphi microservices in the middle of this picture, and the question was around, they're deployed in Docker, whether they were deployed in Docker on Linux or whether that was in Docker on Windows, or exactly what the deployment looked like.
Kevin, do you want to comment about this one? Are you there?
Yes, I am. Sure, I can talk a little bit about it. Well, on the customer, all the production environment is running on Linux right now. All the new features that we are delivering are running on Linux inside an Apache, because they are RAD server modules. So exactly the sample Fernando showed in the video, in the demo, is the way we do in the customer. So we have some containers already prepared to run a RAD server module, and then we start how many containers are necessary to each feature or to each module we need. For example, we have one of the services we have is related to the postal code, and during the year we have around 5 or 6 instances of the postal code service, and in the end of the day they are dropped and only one instance stay alive, one Docker image instance stay alive. So all this scalability is possible because of the Docker, and using Linux is more powerful than Windows nowadays. Microsoft is, as far as I know, Microsoft is still working on working on the Linux kernel on Windows. I don't remember the project name, but it's something like that. The Linux Linux kernel on Windows, and this will make things easier and more powerful when they are available to the market, but is still on the pre-release stage, so it's not viable to a production environment, right? So we are using Linux in production, and we are getting pretty good results.
Okay. I think one of the questions that came up that maybe we kind of slid past in the presentation was around the person sort of got what Docker was for, but they didn't really understand what Kubernetes was for. And so just to feel free to dive in, but from my point of view, Kubernetes is kind of the management layer that decides where these containers should run and how many copies of these containers should run. So Kubernetes kind of manages all of your servers that are available in your cluster, and then you can be quite declarative about it and say, okay, I need to always have 2 copies of this container running, and this other container I always want running 3 of those or whatever, and then it will take care of making sure that those rules are always true, and when load increases, it can start up additional servers, and when one dies, it can take care of starting another one somewhere else, so that, again, like we said before, you can focus much more on just writing the service and not about all of the plumbing around it.
Yeah, I agree, and I'd like to add my sense on this. There are many situations that Docker can help to solve, but one of the main or at least one of the one I like is that one that is to solve that problem when we developers used to say it works on my machine.
Yeah.
So Docker is able to create a black box and an immutable box. So if it runs on a computer, it should run exactly the same on another one. So it's easier to deploy a package, a solution in different environments, in different computers in the same way. And as you said, when you have the need to create, to deploy many instances of a single thing, of a single service, it's so much easier. You, with a single command, you can start how many instances you need from a service.
Okay. One of the other questions that's just come in while we've been talking is about the actual refactoring of the code that was in the original Delphi application. You know, how much can you? It might be hard, but can you give us a bit of a feeling for what was involved in taking that code out of that client-server Delphi application and refactoring it into a service? Like, how much effort? What sort of things were you changing? That kind of stuff. Obviously, I'm guessing the BDE came out.
Sure, and we can start saying that RenderX was a big partner
Okay.
because we need to guarantee that after the refactoring, everything should work as it worked before. So and you can guess how much dependency the code have since it was created so many years ago. So there was many code in buttons and objects on the screen. So many business rules that were inside the forms, and this is hard to break, to make independent, to this code, make this code independent to become an API. So the job itself was to isolate, to separate the business rule from the view part, from the view layer. So extract the business rules and the codes from the forms to other units, sometimes create some classes, but to the object orientation was not something that we should have. So we at least organize the code, but not always create classes for them at the first time. And after those code are reorganized, we were able to get those units and put them on the server side, compiled like an endpoint. With and after being an endpoint, we got back to that screen, to that screen, that form, and instead of call local procedure, we called a procedure that will call the API. So basically, this was the effort we had to do. Some screens, some forms. It took more effort because of their complexity, but in many cases it was not too hard to do, because since you extract the business rules from the button click and makes the button call another procedure, doesn't matter if this procedure executes the business rules or it calls an API that executes the business rules. So you only need to guarantee that after this refactoring, everything works as expected. And that's because I said that RunnerX was a big partner in this job.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you're kind of using your, almost like you'd do with a unit test, for example, but you're using RunnerX to define your user interface test before you touched anything. This is how it currently works. Make those refactoring changes, make sure it still works from a user perspective exactly the same way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Of course, you could test the code, but the code could do the same, but the end user could see things different.
Right.
So RunnerX helped us to achieve this.
Yeah, and I guess ultimately the end user experience is the one that matters in a lot of cases.
Yeah, even because it's something that we had more than 200 users daily using the system, and they couldn't see too much difference from one day to other.
Yeah, well, and that makes me think, we were talking earlier about the Delphi guys who after 10 years, had to deal with all this change. But I imagine these users, some of whom had probably been using the application for 20 years, and some of those guys would be very resistant to anything changing. So you're kind of changing all of the infrastructure out from under them without them really noticing.
Yeah.
Cool. We're getting a lot of comments about thanking us for the webinar, but I can't at the moment see any other questions in there. Did you guys get any other questions that you want to cover off in discussion?
No, I don't think. I think we are fine. Just one comment that I'd like to add is there was a question about SonarQube that were used in the project, and the integration we have today, the integration that is available today, actually is a plugin created by one of our MVPs. It's available on the GitHub, but it's not so updated. It has some, and it does not covers all the metrics that SonarQube has, so it's partial. It's a partial coverage, but helps in some cases. But I'd like to mention there is. I just put the link in the chat. There is a request in the SonarQube community to add Delphi official support for Delphi in SonarQube. So if people that are interested on this can vote, I think maybe they can consider adding us as a client.
Okay. All right. Very cool. Alrighty. Well, this has been a little longer than we expected, but hopefully I've been impressed with how many people have stayed for the long haul. So hopefully that was because it was interesting. Thank you. Oh, hang on. There's one more. Well, just got in time, Richard. Okay. So the question about the perception of performance to the end user. So when they moved from running this app through Citrix to running it through this container-based backend, was it, what was sort of the impression in terms of faster, slower, whatever? I guess I could imagine there being, you'd gain things on some sides and lose them on the other.
It's a really interesting question, because there are 2 points of view to answer this. The first one is the user experience, because being a local software running on their machine right now, they feel more, they feel better using the software, because each time it clicks a button, for example, he or she can see what is happening at this time, and on Citrix or any other remote terminal technology, you can't have a good user experience, because all the screen needs to be transferred, and it's at least slower than a little bit slower than the local rendering. So they had a good experience, a better experience in using the software locally. And as we were dealing with less data than the client server generally does, because when if we got back 20 years ago, to make a full select all from table and open the data set was not a big problem, right? If we used to do this some years ago. And nowadays, with this new concept, this new architecture in mind, it's a new mindset, and we used to do faster query. So every time you do a SQL statement, you always think if it's really necessary to get all the records or all the fields, and this kind of worry makes things lightweight, and being lightweight, it's even faster than it was before.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I guess, as you say, this, in addition to the change in the delivery infrastructure from Citrix to a live local app with microservices backend, as you say, it was probably a chance for the Delphi guys to clean things up and do things slightly differently along the way.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay, very cool. All right, we've just had one person post that wherever they were, I guess we could work it out based on the time zones, that it was 4 a.m. where they were. So they were. I'm glad we managed to keep them awake through the early hours. But it's probably a good, unless you guys have got anything else to add, it's probably a good point to wrap it up. I know it's past lunchtime here, so that doesn't really. I feel a bit bad saying that when he's been up at 4 a.m. and I'm complaining about missing lunch. But anyway, we should probably wrap it up. Thank you, both of you, very much for doing this. It's I imagine getting well into the evening for you, so I really appreciate it. And as I said to everybody else before, we'll post details about the replay availability and some of the other materials as a follow-up to this.
Perfect. So thank you, and please feel free to stay in touch. It will be a pleasure to help, and it's always a pleasure to help the community to know the cases and the histories around the world, right?
Yeah,
especially the good ones.
Yeah, well, actually, a few people have said during this that we need more stories like this. So yeah, maybe. Maybe some of the people on the session can tell us their stories, and we can share that.
Exactly. That's it.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And to all
thank
of
you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure.
Sorry, Fernando, talking over the top of you.
Sorry. No, I just saying it was a pleasure to help, and I'd like to say we appreciate everyone that was connected and supported this 2 hours. So
yeah,
really, really good. Thank you.
All right, cool. Well put. All right, thank you, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening or morning, depending on where you are, and we'll talk to you next time.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.